Stand up. This is my seat. Stop! You're hurting me. I'm pregnant. Do you think I care? Stand up. This is my seat. Stop! You're hurting me. I'm pregnant. Do you think I care?
They didn't know he was watching. That was their first mistake. Their last mistake was thinking she was alone. 4 women walked into a restaurant on a Tuesday afternoon looking for someone to make small. They found a pregnant Black American woman sitting by herself, reading a book, minding her business. They saw an easy target. They saw someone they could humiliate without consequence. They saw someone nobody was going to defend. They saw someone who didn't belong in their city, in their restaurant, in their world. They were wrong about every single thing. Because in a corner booth, so still he could have been carved from stone, sat the man who owned half the city's underworld. The man whose name made boardrooms go quiet and back alleys go cold. The man who had built an empire on silence and taken it apart with a single phone call. He watched them approach his wife. He watched them crowd her table. He watched one of them grab her wrist. And he didn't move. Not yet, because Kang Seojun didn't react. He calculated, and what he was calculating in those 30 seconds of cold, absolute stillness was not whether to destroy them. He was deciding how completely. If this story already has you, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This channel is where revenge is served slow, love is built fierce, and justice looks nothing like what you expected. Now let's go back to where it all started, because before the storm, there was the most beautiful kind of quiet. Mary Dean had been trying to find quiet for 7 months. Not the forced quiet of bed rest or the anxious quiet of doctor's visits. Real quiet. The kind that settled around you like something warm and let you remember who you were before pregnancy, turned your body into a construction site, and your emotions into a weather system with no forecast. She had found it that Tuesday afternoon at a restaurant called the Gilded Crane, a small, elegant place in one of Seoul's wealthiest neighborhoods that Seojun had mentioned exactly once, in passing, calling it quiet. Coming from him, that was a 5-star review. She arrived at noon, settled into a table by the window, ordered the latte she had been craving for 3 days, and opened the novel she had been 2 chapters into for 6 weeks. One hand rested on her belly. 7 months, 29 weeks and 4 days to be precise, because she counted now. She counted everything. The kicks, the hours of sleep, the days until she could meet the person who had completely rearranged her internal organs and somehow still made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. Seojun didn't know she was here. She had slipped out while he was in a meeting, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. Restaurant, book, latte, don't send anyone. She had underlined the last part twice. He had, naturally, sent someone anyway. Park Jin-ho was seated 3 tables behind her in civilian clothes, pretending to read a menu, doing a mediocre job of it. She had decided not to acknowledge him. Plausible deniability was the foundation of a happy marriage to Kang Seojun. The restaurant was warm and smelled like roasted barley and fresh coffee. The afternoon light came through the window at exactly the right angle. Her latte arrived with a small crane pattern in the foam. For 45 minutes, Mary existed in a state of perfect, uncomplicated peace. She had no idea that peace was about to be shattered by 4 women who had just made the worst decision of their lives. Then the door opened. She heard them before she saw them. That particular brand of loud that wasn't accidental, the kind of noise that was a statement, that announced arrival like a flag being planted. 4 women filed in wearing clothes that cost real money and fit like armor, the kind of women who moved through a room already deciding what belonged in it and what didn't. The one in front had sharp eyes and a sharper mouth, the kind of woman who had spent her whole life being told she was the most important person in every room she entered. Her name was Jaeyeon. Mary would learn that later. In this moment, she was simply the problem. Jaeyeon found Mary in 4 seconds. Mary felt it, that particular prickle, the assessment, the categorization, the decision made in half a second about what she was and what she deserved. She had felt it before, in different cities, in different rooms, wearing different faces. She knew its shape intimately. She turned slightly toward the window and picked up her book. But these 4 women were not going to let her disappear into it. The four women got their drinks. She heard them moving in her direction. She kept her eyes on the page. "Excuse me." The voice landed right beside her table, not a question, an announcement. She looked up. Jaeyeon stood at the front, her three companions fanned out beside her, Subin with her arms crossed, Hayoon already smiling with her mouth only, Yirin slightly behind the others but watching with hungry eyes. Four women crowding a table built for two, wearing the particular expression of people who expected the world to rearrange itself for them. "I'm waiting for someone," Mary said, polite, firm, the tone of a woman who had handled this before and was prepared to handle it again. Jaeyeon's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Waiting for someone," she repeated, glancing at the empty chairs around the table. "In Seoul, at this restaurant." Her Korean was deliberate, pointed, designed to exclude. "This is a members' dining establishment. Are you certain you have the right place?" "I'm certain," Mary said. Subin stepped forward. She looked at Mary's belly with the particular expression of someone who had decided that what they were seeing was an inconvenience. "This table gets the afternoon light," she said. "It's reserved for regulars. You wouldn't know that." She smiled. "Obviously." Hayoon tilted her head. Her voice was almost sweet, which made it worse. 7 months. She looked at Mary's stomach the way someone looked at something that had appeared where it had no business being. "You really came all the way here, alone, like this?" She let the pause sit. "That's brave or something." The word landed like a slap without the contact. Mary set her book down slowly. She was 7 months pregnant in a room full of people, and she was not going to be moved from a table she had as much right to as anyone else. She was a woman who had stood beside one of the most powerful men in Seoul and learned to hold her ground. These women were nothing she hadn't seen before. She opened her mouth to say exactly that, measured, final, and devastating. She never got the chance. Jaeyeon reached across the table. She pushed Mary's book aside. Then she grabbed her wrist. "Let's not make this uncomfortable," Jaeyeon said, fingers tightening. "For you." Everything went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when something crosses a line so obvious that the room itself holds its breath. "Get your hand off me," Mary said, low, dangerous, the voice she didn't use often. Jaeyeon's grip tightened. "Your husband isn't here." She looked around the restaurant with theatrical concern. "Or is there a husband? I wasn't sure." She smiled at her friends. Subin laughed. Hayoon covered her mouth. Yirin looked at the floor, and that was the only honest thing that happened at that table. Yirin at least knew. What none of them knew was that the most dangerous man in Seoul had been sitting in the corner the entire time, and he had just put down his coffee cup. In a corner booth that Mary had walked past without registering, a man sat completely motionless. He had been there when she arrived, had watched her settle in, had watched her order, had watched the afternoon light fall across her face and her hand rest on her belly and the specific quality of peace that crossed her expression when she thought no one was looking. He had been going to leave. He had been in the neighborhood, the meeting had ended early, and he had recognized the restaurant from the note she had left and come in to find her. He had decided not to interrupt her quiet. That decision had now become something else entirely. Kang Seojun sat in that corner booth and watched Jaeyeon's fingers close around his pregnant wife's wrist. He watched Mary's jaw tighten and her chin come up. He watched her tell her to let go. He watched the woman tighten her grip instead. And something in Seojun's chest went completely, utterly, terrifyingly still. He had felt rage before. He had built an empire on controlled fury, on the ability to transform anger into strategy with such precision that his enemies never saw the knife coming until it was already in their side. He had destroyed companies, dismantled fortunes, and ended careers with the calm efficiency of a man who understood that the loudest power was always the quietest. But this was different. This was Mary. This was 29 weeks and 4 days of the person he loved more than his own continued existence. This was the woman who had walked into his world knowing exactly what it was and chosen to stay anyway. The woman who argued with him about playlists and remembered the names of every person on his staff and cried at documentaries about animals and made him feel, for the first time in his life, like the world was something worth being gentle with. Her wrist, Jaeyeon's fingers were on her wrist. Seojun didn't stand. He didn't shout. He set down his coffee cup with absolute precision, the way he set down everything, deliberately, without a wasted motion. He looked at the four women with the particular quality of attention that his organization's enemies had described, in various depositions and confessions, as the most frightening thing they had ever experienced. Not anger, calculation, the look of a man deciding not if but how. And he had already decided. Jae-yeon had pulled Mary half out of her chair when the voice came from the corner. "I wouldn't do that." Quiet, almost gentle. The kind of voice that didn't need volume because it carried something else entirely. The absolute certainty of a man who had never once in his life issued an empty warning. Seo-jun was standing. Nobody had seen him rise. He was simply there, the way weather was simply there, present, inevitable, already in motion before you thought to look up. Jae-yeon turned. She saw a Korean man in an impeccable dark suit, not large, not visibly armed, just standing there with his hands loose at his sides and his face completely, disturbingly calm. "Who are you?" Jae-yeon said. Her voice had lost some of its confidence without her seeming to notice. Seo-jun didn't answer. His eyes had moved to Mary, a single look that contained everything. "Are you all right? I see you. I'm here. I'm sorry it took me 4 seconds." She gave the smallest nod she had. Then he looked at Jae-yeon. "You have made a mistake," Seo-jun said, conversational, pleasant almost. "I want you to understand that clearly before we continue. Not a misunderstanding, not a moment you'll be able to explain away. A mistake, the permanent kind." Soo-bin stepped forward. "You don't know who we are." The corner of Seo-jun's mouth moved. Not a smile, the shadow of one. The kind of expression that people who knew him well recognized as the last warning before there were no more warnings. "You'll find out," he said softly. He crossed the restaurant in 7 steps, unhurried and measured, and placed himself between Mary and the 4 women. He took her hand, his thumb moving once across the redness on her wrist where Jae-yeon's grip had been. He felt her hand squeeze his. He helped her to her feet. He didn't look at Jae-yeon again. He didn't need to. The decision was already made. They walked out of the gilded crane into the Seoul afternoon. Behind them, Jae-yeon said something sharp to her companions. Seo-jun didn't register it. He was already somewhere else entirely. He was already building. In the back of the armored Maybach, with the city sliding past tinted windows and Jinho driving in careful, practiced silence, Seo-jun held Mary's hand and looked at the mark on her wrist. "Tell me exactly what they said," he said quietly. "Seo-jun." "Not because I'm going to lose my mind." He looked at her. His face was still. His eyes were the eyes she knew, the ones that held everything and released only what he chose to release. "Because I want the full picture." She told him all of it, the table, the comments about the restaurant, the way Jae-yeon had looked at her like she was something that had wandered in from the street, the word brave delivered like a blade, the question about whether there was even a husband, the way Ha-yoon had looked at her stomach, the grip on her wrist, Jae-yeon's smile when she tightened it. Then Mary said something she hadn't planned to say. "The one in the back," she said quietly. "Year in." She looked at the floor the whole time. She knew it was wrong, she just didn't stop it. She paused. "I want you to remember that when you decide what happens to her." Seo-jun looked at her. Something in his eyes shifted, a small recalibration. He nodded once. "I'll remember," he said. Seo-jun listened without moving through everything else. When she finished, the car was quiet for a moment. "Are you in pain?" he asked. "No, I'm angry." "Good," he said. "Stay angry, it's yours." He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to the inside of her wrist, just above the redness, with a deliberateness that was entirely him. Nothing accidental, nothing careless. A statement. "I'm going to handle this." "Seo-jun." "They grabbed your wrist." Quiet, final. "They questioned whether our child had a father. They looked at your stomach like it was something to be ashamed of." His thumb moved across her knuckles. "There is no version of this world where that costs them nothing, not while I'm in it." He made one phone call. One. "Mr. Park." His voice was the voice he used for business, precise, stripped of everything personal. 4 women, the Gilded Crane restaurant, 40 minutes ago, Jae-yeon Choi, Soo-bin Lim, Ha-yoon Oh Yerin Kwon. He paused. I'll have Jinho send you the images from the restaurant's exterior cameras. I want their full picture, assets, family, connections, pressure points. Every door open to them, every floor they're standing on. Another pause. 1 hour. He hung up. Mary watched him from across the car. This was the part of loving Kang Seojun that she had made peace with a long time ago. The line between the man who kissed her wrist and the man who dismantled worlds was not a line at all. It was the same man. The same precise, deliberate, absolute attention turned in different directions. She had learned not to fear it. She had learned, if she was being honest with herself in the quiet moments, that she trusted it. She trusted him. "How bad?" she asked. He looked at her. "As bad as they made it," he said simply. For Jaeyeon Choi and everyone connected to her, that answer was going to mean everything. They went to Hansung Tower. Not to their apartment on the 43rd floor where the nursery was half finished and the crib they'd spent 3 hours arguing about stood assembled in the corner. They went down to the level below the lobby, accessed by a keycard that fewer than 7 people in Seoul possessed. The war room, black walls, obsidian table, a bank of screens that covered one entire wall. This was the room where the legitimate face of Seojun's empire ended and the real thing began. Mary had been in this room twice before. She sat in the chair he pulled out for her and watched him become, in the space of a single doorway, something slightly different from the man in the restaurant. Not colder, more focused. A lens sharpened to a single point. Mr. Park arrived in 43 minutes. He was a compact man in his 50s with a forgettable face that concealed a mind like a surgical instrument. He laid out what he had found on the main screen with the calm efficiency of someone reading a weather report. Jaeyeon Choi, 31 years old, no independent income, sole beneficiary of the Choi Family Trust, $80 million administered through Choi Holdings. Her father is Chairman Choi Byung-soo. Seojun was very still. "Chairman Choi," he said. "Yes, sir. Currently in final negotiations to secure the Gangnam Cultural District Development contract. He has leveraged the majority of his personal assets to secure the bid." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 2 degrees. "The other 3, Seojun said. Park advanced to the next screen. Soo Bin Lim. Her family owns Lim Textiles, mid-sized, heavily dependent on 3 distribution contracts currently under review by the Trade Ministry. He moved again. "How you know? Her husband is Oh Yi-won, a senior director at KSB Financial. His position depends entirely on a board appointment being confirmed next month." He paused. "Yurin Kwon, youngest. Her family runs a small restaurant group in Mapo. No significant assets. She appears to have been present, but less active." Seojun looked at Yurin's face on the screen for a long moment. He thought about what Mary had said in the car. She knew it was wrong. She just didn't stop it. "Leave Yurin Kwon's family out of it," he said quietly. "Her alone, a warning, nothing more." Park noted it without comment. Seojun's eyes returned to Jaeyeon. "The trust, how is it structured?" Park explained. The board, the pressure points, the bank relationships. Seojun listened with his hands clasped behind his back and his eyes on the screen. And Mary watched him build something in real time, not a plan so much as an architecture. Precise, interconnected, every piece supporting every other piece. "Freeze it," Seojun said. "Tonight, by morning it goes into forced review." He turned to Park. Silent. "No fingerprints. I want Jaeyeon Choi to walk into a store tomorrow and have her card declined." "Yes, sir." Lim Textiles. The 3 distribution contracts under ministry review. I want the review accelerated. This week. Every irregularity documented and on the right desk by morning. "Yes, sir." Oh Yi-won's board appointment. The confirmation committee. Find me 2 members and their pressure points. The appointment does not go through. Park was typing without looking up. "And their social presence," Seojun said. "I want it gone, not deactivated. Gone, every post, every photo, every comment. I want them to open their phones and find nothing." He returned to the table and sat. For a moment he said nothing. Mary watched his face. She saw something move through it, not pleasure at what was coming, exactly. Something more like the particular satisfaction of precision, of a problem being solved correctly. Chairman Choi, Seo-jun said quietly. Sir, Park said. His development bid. You mentioned irregularities in the environmental clearance filings. Extensively, sir. We have wire transfers, internal correspondence, falsified assessments, and the names of 2 ministry officials who received payments. The investors, the Ministry Oversight Committee, the financial regulator, Seo-jun said. Simultaneously, time the delivery to the minute. I want every call he makes in the next 24 hours to be about a different wall coming down. He looked at Park. Complete. Complete, sir. Park left. The room hummed with the quiet of something that had already been set in motion, something that could not be stopped. Seo-jun turned to Mary. He crossed to where she sat and knelt in front of her chair the way he sometimes did, not performing humility, but choosing proximity, choosing to be at her level. He took both her hands. It's done, he said. She looked at him. What exactly is done? Their certainty, he said. The version of soul they thought they owned. He paused. Jaeyeon Choi will wake up tomorrow with nothing she didn't earn herself, which means nothing. Soo-bin's family will spend the next year in ministry meetings they are not going to enjoy. Ha-yoon's husband will find that a board seat he thought was guaranteed has quietly disappeared. His jaw tightened slightly. And Chairman Choi will spend the foreseeable future explaining himself to people with subpoenas. Seo-jun, her voice was quiet. They grabbed your wrist, he said. They questioned whether our daughter had a father. He looked at her. There is no version of this where that costs them nothing, not while I'm in it. Mary went still. You said our daughter. He looked at her. Something in his face shifted the smallest thing, but she saw it. I did. She had been holding the question for 3 weeks, since the ultrasound. She had been waiting for the right moment. He had known since before she said a word, because he always knew, and he had been waiting for her to be ready to say it out loud. Our daughter, she repeated quietly. She looked at him for a long time. At the face she had memorized, the jaw, the eyes that were calculating and devastating and entirely hers in the same moment. She thought about what it meant to be loved by a man like this, the weight of it, the strange, complicated, absolute safety of it. Don't kill anyone, she said finally. I wasn't going to. Say it like you mean it. The corner of his mouth moved, the real one, the one that was only for her. I wasn't going to kill anyone, Mary. Good. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. Because this baby needs a father who is not in prison. He closed his eyes. His hand moved to her stomach. Careful, deliberate, the way he touched everything that mattered to him. The baby kicked. He felt it. She watched his entire face change, the way it always did. Every wall, every layer, every carefully maintained surface gone, just a man with his hand on his wife's stomach and his eyes closed. And something on his face that had no name except maybe the look of someone who understood, finally, what they were fighting for. The first domino fell the following morning at 9:47 a.m. Jaeyeon Choi was at a boutique in Cheongdam-dong, selecting a bag she didn't need with money she hadn't earned when her card was declined. She stared at the machine, tried again, declined, pulled out her second card, declined, a third. The sales associate maintained professional neutrality with the practiced grace of someone who had seen this before, but never quite with this level of entitlement on the other side of the counter. Jaeyeon stepped away and called her father. Appa, something is wrong with my cards. It's probably a system error, Chairman Choi said, distracted. He was in a meeting. Call the bank. Jaeyeon called the bank. The representative informed her that the Choi Family Trust had been frozen pending investigation. Certain irregularities in the trust's investment structure. The timeline for resolution was unclear. Jaeyeon sat down on a bench outside the boutique and stared at her phone. Then she opened her Instagram and felt the ground disappear beneath her. It was gone, her Kakao story, gone, every platform, every account. 7 years of carefully curated presence in Seoul's social world, the photos, the events, the proof that she was someone who mattered gone as though it had never existed. And that was only the beginning. Soo-bin's family received notice that same morning that their 3 largest distribution contracts had been suspended pending a ministry review. Lim Textile's phones did not stop ringing until after dark. Ha-Yoon Oh's husband Yi-won received a call at 10:15 a.m. informing him that his board confirmation had been postponed indefinitely due to concerns raised by 2 committee members. He came home early. Ha-Yoon watched him sit at the kitchen table and say nothing for a very long time. 3 walls down, one left standing, but not for long. Chairman Choi's morning was quiet, initially. He had coffee at his usual place, attended a 9 o'clock call with his project team, and spent 20 minutes congratulating himself on how close he was to the largest single contract of his career. At 10:15 a.m., his partner called. At 10:17, his lead investor called. At 10:20, 3 more investors called simultaneously. An email had arrived in every inbox connected to the Gangnam Cultural District development bid. Anonymous sender. Attached. Wire transfer records, internal correspondence, falsified environmental assessments, and the names of 2 ministry officials who had received payments to look the other way. Every detail of how Chairman Choi had built his bid on fraud, documented with the precision of someone who had been holding this information for exactly the right moment. By noon, a major financial outlet had published their first report. By 2 in the afternoon, the ministry had opened a formal investigation. By 4, Choi Holdings stock had dropped 28% and was still falling. Chairman Choi sat in his office and watched the screens and made calls that nobody answered. He was a man standing in a house he had just realized was on fire, in every room, simultaneously. Every thread he pulled led back to the same name, spoken in the same hushed, careful way by people who had thought they were safe, and were now understanding that safety in this city was a permission, not a right. He called the number at 8 that evening. His hands were shaking when he dialed. Seo-jun let it ring 4 times before answering. "I know who you are," Choi said. His voice was the voice of a man who had spent the day being stripped, not just of assets, but of the certainty that had held his whole self-image together. "I know what you've done. Name a price, a partnership, anything." Seo-jun was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his apartment, the lights of Seoul spread out below him. Mary was asleep down the hall. He stood looking at the city with the phone against his ear and let Choi talk. When the man finally ran out of words, Seo-jun spoke. "Yesterday afternoon," he said, "your daughter put her hands on my pregnant wife in a restaurant in this city. She grabbed her wrist. She questioned whether our child had a father. She and her friends looked at my wife's stomach like it was something to be managed." His voice was the same as it always was, quiet, precise, carrying the weight of complete certainty. "I want you to understand something clearly. I didn't take your world because of what it was worth. I took it because it was the most efficient way to teach your daughter that nothing she has ever had was actually hers." Silence. "She learned today what it feels like to have something taken by someone who barely noticed the effort," Seo-jun continued. "She will spend time rebuilding what she lost in 24 hours, and every day she works. She will know why. That is the lesson. I hope she learns it." Choi's voice was shaking now. "You've destroyed everything I've built. My daughter made a mistake. She's young, she doesn't." "Your daughter is 31 years old," Seo-jun said. "She is not young, she has simply never once experienced a consequence." His voice remained level. "You gave her that. Everything she did in that restaurant, the certainty that she could do it, the expectation that there would be no cost, you gave her all of that." A pause. "So, yes, I took what you built, because what you built produced what I watched reach for my wife's wrist." The line was quiet. "The ministry investigation into your development bid will proceed without interference from me," Seo-jun said. "The officials you paid will face their own consequences. I will not protect you from any of it." He paused. "I want you to think about what your daughter saw in that restaurant. A pregnant woman reading a book, alone, in a city that wasn't her home. And I want you to ask yourself what you raised that looked at that and saw an opportunity." He ended the call, and for a long moment, he simply stood there, looking at the city he owned, thinking about the daughter he was about to meet. He walked down the hall. Mary had kicked off the blanket, which she did every night without fail, and he pulled it back over her with the careful precision of a man doing the most important thing he would do all day. He sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. She stirred. "Is it done?" "For now," he said. She opened her eyes and looked at him. In the dark, with the city lights coming through the curtains, she could see his face, the face that Soul feared and she loved, both things completely true and completely compatible. She reached up and touched his jaw. "Come to bed," she said. He lay down beside her, her back against his chest, his arm around her and their daughter, her hand over his. The city recalibrated quietly around the lesson it had been taught, filing it away the way cities filed away the things they knew better than to say out loud. Seo-jun lay in the dark and listened to Mary breathe and felt the small, precise movements of the person they had made together. And the thing that had been cold and still and calculating inside him since the moment he watched a stranger's hand close around her wrist finally, slowly, released. 3 days later, he came home to find Mary standing in the nursery with her hands on her hips and an expression on her face that he had learned, in 2 years of marriage, meant a conversation was already in progress whether he was ready for it or not. "The crib is crooked," she said. He looked at the crib. "It's level. The left side is lower. It's identical on both sides." "Seo-jun." "The left side. I know what I see." He looked at her, at the way she was standing chin up, one hand on the crib railing, 7 months and 4 days of pregnancy making her look simultaneously more powerful and more exhausted than anyone he had ever known. He walked over and checked the crib. "It's level," he said. "It is not level." He looked at her for a moment. Then he sat down on the floor of the nursery, right there in his suit, and started checking the crib legs one by one. She watched him for a second, then sat down beside him, her back against the wall, legs stretched out, one hand on her stomach. They sat like that for a while. "I keep thinking about the other women," Mary said quietly. "The ones in the restaurant who watched, who heard everything and said nothing." She paused. "I'm not angry at them, I understand why, but I keep seeing their faces." Seo-jun said nothing. He knew when she was talking to him and when she was talking through something. This was both. "I don't want our daughter to grow up thinking she has to be quiet about it," Mary said. "I don't want her to think that's just how it is, that you absorb it and move on and don't make a fuss." She looked at her stomach. "I want her to know it's not normal, that she doesn't have to carry what doesn't belong to her." Seo-jun set down the crib leg he was holding and looked at his wife. "She'll know," he said. "How?" "Because her mother will tell her." He looked at Mary. "And because she will grow up watching her mother refuse to carry a single thing that isn't hers." Mary was quiet. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. The nursery was half finished around them, the crib that may or may not have been level, the mobile still in its box, the soft rug from a shop in Insadong that Mary had insisted on, and he had carried 6 blocks in the rain without complaint. "Seo-jun," she said. "Yes." "The left leg is definitely lower." He exhaled. "I'll get the level." She smiled into his shoulder. He pressed his mouth to the top of her head. Outside, Seoul moved through its afternoon, entirely unaware that in a half-finished nursery in a tower on its northern edge, the most feared man in the city's underworld was sitting on the floor checking furniture leg by leg for his wife. Some things, he had learned, were worth more than the empire. Most things when Mary was in the room. 2 weeks later, everything changed. Not slowly, not with warning. The way things changed in Seo-jun's world all at once and without mercy. It started with a phone call Seo-jun wasn't supposed to receive. From a number he didn't recognize, routed through 3 relays that suggested someone who knew how to move without being tracked. He answered it at 6 a.m., standing in the kitchen before Mary was awake, coffee in hand, watching the first light come across the Seoul skyline. The voice on the other end was male, Korean, careful in the way of someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say and was still afraid of saying it. "Mr. Kang, I'm going to tell you something because I have a daughter too, and because what I know is going to happen is something I can't have on my conscience." Seo-jun set down his coffee cup. "Talk," he said. What he heard in the next 4 minutes changed the temperature of the morning. What he heard confirmed something he had been feeling for the past week, a subtle wrongness at the edges of the organization. A pattern in the intelligence reports that didn't align. A name appearing in 2 places it had no business being. He had been watching it. He had not yet decided what it meant. Now he knew exactly what it meant, and it was worse than he had imagined. He stood in the kitchen after the call ended and looked at the city for a long moment. Behind him, down the hall, he could hear the soft sounds of Mary beginning to wake. The particular sequence he had memorized without meaning to, the way she shifted in the sheets, the small sound she made, the pause before she sat up. He had 2 weeks until the baby came, possibly less. And somewhere inside the organization he had built from nothing, something had gone wrong in a way that was moving toward him, toward them. He picked up his phone and called Park. "Get me everything on Director Lim," he said quietly. "Before 8, before anyone knows you're looking." "Sir," Park said, then after a pause, "is it serious?" Seo Jun looked at the hallway, at the closed door at the end of it, at the world behind that door that was 29 weeks and 4 days old and entirely unaware of what was happening in a kitchen 50 feet away. "Yes," he said, "get me everything." He heard Mary's feet hit the floor. He heard her say his name, still half asleep, the way she said it in the mornings, without armor, without anything in it except him. He hung up and turned toward the hallway. He would protect this, whatever it took, whatever came next. He always did. Part 2 is coming, and what's waiting on the other side of that phone call is going to change everything you think you know about Kang Seojun. Director Lim has been inside the organization for 6 years. He has been trusted. He has been close. And he has been watching Mary since long before Seojun knew her name. Subscribe right now. Hit the bell. Drop a comment below. Do you think the betrayal goes deeper than one man? Because I promise you it does. And part 2 is going to prove it.
I prayed, I said, God, if I'm meant to be alone, at least take away my desire to be loved. And I think that's the hardest part about loneliness. You can still have great experiences alone, but every time you have a great experience, you're stuck wondering, wow, wouldn't this be so much better if I could share this moment with someone else? Where's the Pam to my Jim? Where's the Patrick to my SpongeBob? I feel like I'm cursed because at every moment I always want there to be another person. So I ask, take away my desires and set me free.
Powerful stories, real emotions. Subscribe now and be part of the 2K family.